Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, I know how you're doing, so I won't ask, because it's how we're both doing. But let's just get into talking about some football.
At least I had the Packers, and well, as also we got distracted by fantasy football for a little while there.
Yeah, I guess. Yep. But anyway, Dad, we have a lot to talk about today. Today we are breaking down the Packers game against the Lions from this past weekend. We're going to be doing a deep dive into, what went right, what went wrong. A little bit more went wrong than went right, as has been going so far this week. It's kind of one of those weeks. But before we get into any of that, Dad, we did have some news from the Packers in this
Pretty big news.
Yes, some pretty big news.
This has been rumored for a little while.
Yeah, and it was that the Packers, on the trade deadline day, that's the only thing that happened yesterday, right? Was the trade deadline, NFL trade deadline, right? That's the only thing. But anyway, Preston Smith traded for a 7th round pick. The Packers, make this move. I think on its face, it kind of seems like a cost-saving move, and these numbers are from Ken Ingalls on Twitter, who's a very good follow if you want to, get really into the cap side of Packers Twitter. But so by trading Preston Smith for a 7th rounder, they do save $2 million in cap space this year, $7 million or $7.5 million in cap space next year, $18 million in cap space in 2026, and $1.7 million in cap space in 2027. So on its face, it does seem like, they only got a 7th. It's like, well, they did save a lot of cap space. But this is something that Ken Ingalls later tweeted on, and I thought was very interesting, was if they had actually just kept him for the rest of this season and then cut him in the offseason, they would have saved almost the exact same amount of money. They would have ended up spending only $2 million more of cap space from this year.
So let me just clarify that. So just the $2 million from this year and none going forward?
That is how I understood what Ken Ingalls was saying, is it really only saved them $2 million to trade him now, as opposed to having him play out this year and cut him in the offseason.
So they wouldn't owe him anything if they cut him in the offseason.
That is how I understood what he was saying, and I trust him on the cap side of these things. So trading him now for a 7th really seems to only, as opposed to cutting him in the offseason, they could have had him play out the rest of this year. Saves them $2 million and protects them from, possibly having to pay out if he gets injured or something like that. And so to me, this is actually, partially a cost-saving move, but even more so, I think it's about getting opportunities for Van Ness, Enigbare, Mosby, and Cox. And maybe is it because the Packers think that these players are better than Preston is right now? I mean, just last game, we'll talk about this later against the Lions, both Van Ness and Enigbare actually played more snaps than Preston Smith for the first time this year. So is it that they think that they're playing better than Preston? Is it just that they want to see what they have so that they have a better evaluation for this upcoming draft and offseason? I don't know. I think it could be either. It could be a little bit of both. Mosby just last week played 3 snaps and had a sack, which obviously is not the kind of efficiency that you can expect to continue, especially when the sack was when Penei Sewell fell over. But
I'm sure it'll continue.
But even
he's got magic powers that make people fall over in front of him.
I know, but even if it doesn't,
that'd be pretty nice as a pass rusher.
That's still more. The 1 sack and 3 snaps is still, even if it wasn't that much efficiency, is way better than any of the pass rushers we've had, so far.
But the one thing that we talked about before about this whole idea is like, I don't think it's not necessarily. It could be neither evaluation nor that they think they're better now, but that they think they need to play them now so that they can get better to help the team by the end of the year.
That is a very fair point, is that they will not be where they need to be by week 18 by the divisional round if they don't play now. And they're going to need to develop, because I think it's fair to say that both Van Ness and Enigbare is interesting, because I don't think he's not someone that we have a super high, expectation of, coming in as a 5th round pick in his 3rd year. He's been very good for a 5th round pick, but Van Ness specifically, I think they need more from. And he's a 2nd year 1st round pick. You took him 12th overall. And I think on the year he has less than 7 or 8 pressures total. It's not very many, whatever it is. And they just need more out of him. I mean, he's been pretty good against the run, I will say. And he works really hard. You watch him out there, and he is like busting his ass to get like down the line and trace down the backside of runs. But they just need more from him as a pass rusher, because right now he doesn't seem to have a plan. And none of the pass rushers are really, playing up to their level. Even Gary, who's having he's having a fine year, an above average year. It's not, what they need from him and what they've seen from him in the past. So moving Preston, I think for me, I understand the logic behind wanting to get the young guys more snaps. I understand getting something back and moving off of a 31-year-old guy and getting anything. And some people have posed it as like, well, just imagine you traded him for Malik Willis and you'd feel a little bit better about that. And I don't know if I would actually when I think about it that way. Malik Willis is awesome though. No, that was not a shot at him or anything. But yeah, I get the cost saving measure. I do think that, trading off vets who are important in the locker room, like Jaden Reed tweeted about it and he was like, dang, like hate to see him go. It wasn't that's not an exact quote, but it was something like around that. I don't really have an opinion yet on this move. Which I know is like, oh, wait till see how it works out. I mean, that's easy peasy, but what do you think about this move, Dad?
I'm a little surprised that this move was done with no other move.
Yeah.
That's the thing that surprised me the most. Like, okay, we heard rumors this was happening. He hasn't been playing that great this year, but it seems like they're lacking a little bit on defense. And so when they're already having trouble getting pressure, it's like, well, yeah, I think we just got to start just dialing up the blitz like madmen. We got to go full on, Brian Flores.
Yep, Flores. Yeah. And the thing is, like, you are exactly like you said, you're trading off of what has been your most disappointing position. And so that you could look at that two ways. You could look at it as like, yeah, they've been disappointing and you're moving off of one of the guys who has been disappointing. Or you can look at it as like, hey, they've been disappointing and you're making that position weaker. So I don't know. It could be one or the other. When I'm looking at it on its face, I think, part of it is that, I think Preston's going to be really good in Pittsburgh. I think that he's going to have a, resurgence there. I think it's just he's not really a 4-3 end. He's really more of a, 3-4 end or 3-4 edge rusher rather. And I think that it's just not as good of a fit. I do wonder about, like you mentioned, blitzing more. I do wonder if this affects the way they send simulated pressures because he was their best edge rusher at dropping into coverage.
This is true. Even though it drove everybody crazy, if you want to mix it up and disguise blitzes.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like it drives everyone crazy.
Best one at it.
It drives everyone crazy, but all those people also want simulated pressures, and so it's like this is what you have to do. If you want simulated pressures, you're going to have to drop some linemen into coverage.
And it's funny that he's the best at it because it doesn't actually seem
doesn't look like he would be good at it, but he's got such a wingspan and he's so big and he moves well for his size. Like he moves pretty well for like being 260. But I did, I added Justice Mosqueda. I replied to a Justice Mosqueda tweet on Twitter, and he said, they're dropping D tackles into coverage, so I'm not that worried about it. And I was like, okay, well, he knows more about
Kenny Clark gets dropped into coverage sometimes too. That's been a thing for a while as well. That Kenny will drop into coverage.
Yeah, and so it's like, okay, like maybe it won't matter as much as I think, but I was like, that was one thing I was concerned about is whether or not simulateds would be harder to run without him there. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
I think the main thing about simulateds is like you got to get home fast.
Oh yeah.
When you're doing all that, like, coming up, mucking up in all the gaps and then you send in a bunch of people, like whether you send a bunch or you disguise who's coming, either way, you got to get home fast.
Exactly. But I think that's pretty much all of our thoughts on the Preston Smith thing, unless you had anything else you wanted to close out there on.
That was it. I was hoping they would add somebody, either a corner who would be an improvement over corner two. An improvement over corner two could go a long way.
I'm not as worried about the corner group as anyone else is. I think that group stabilizes with Evan Williams back. And the other problem is that group stabilizes with Jair back, and then the counter argument is, well, Jair is hurt all the time. It's like, well, that is fair. But I think that group with Keyshawn as your outside corner too is fine. I don't have a whole lot of problems with it. It's not like a super strength, but I don't see it as a glaring weakness. I did want to see them try and at least make a move for an edge rusher. The funny thing, which we talked about, is Zadarius Smith would be perfect, but there is no chance he's coming back. So that's that. And now he's with the Lions, which is a good pickup for them.
You could have done that just for the entertainment value.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been a really nice fit. They needed just like an edge rusher, and like that would have been nice. But at the same time, the counter argument to that is they've invested all of this at the position, like multiple firsts, a lot of money. Just go figure it out. And it's like, okay, that's a fair argument. It's like, how much more investment do you really need at that spot? But yeah, so
apparently more.
I know. Yeah, I would have liked to see them go for Ojulari from the Giants, but apparently the price tag there was pretty high. I don't know if there were really any other edge rushers that were really,
we did do some wild speculation about like, do they move Quay Walker to rushing the passer a lot more?
Yeah, we talked about it. I wouldn't hate it, but at the same time, I don't think that. I think that's he's a better.
It might be his best role in the team.
But much like him at linebacker, the idea of him at edge rusher is better than actually him at edge rusher.
How about Edgerrin Cooper as a full-time rusher?
they need him at linebacker because Quay's not good.
He's their best. He's also their best cover linebacker.
Yeah, I was gonna say he can't. Can we clone him? Can we have two of him? If we could have two Edgerrin Coopers, that'd be sick. But anyway, yeah. So that's the recap of the trade deadline from the Packers' point of view. Moving off of Preston, I kind of understand it. I see also there are some valid criticisms of it, but let's move on to talking about this game against the Lions. We've been putting it off long enough. The Packers lose 24-14, fall to 6-3 on the year and 7th in the NFC and 3rd in the NFC North. And they're going into their bye this coming week, so we will not have a pregame for you this week. We will, after the Week 10 slate, have a bye check-in, like what's going right for the Packers, what's going wrong for the Packers. And we'll be talking, about some numbers. We'll have some fun data for you for that. But so no preseason or no pregame this week, rather. Once again, check out, subscribe on all of your platforms, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Leave a review. We would really appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker, or get off of that nasty app, either one. But if you're on there still, check us out.
And on the bye week, I would say watch some stress-free football.
Yeah, that is the thing. I am looking forward. I think I'm looking forward to the bye week as much as the Packers are looking forward to the bye week, because I need 1 week off from just like having to stress about the Packers, and I can just watch the games and not even worry about it.
You
just watch Red Zone all day.
7 hours of Red Zone.
I love Red Zone. Actually, no, I won't. I will be watching. Well, I guess yes, technically 7 hours of Red Zone plus the Germany game plus the evening game.
Oh, right. It's it's like 6:30 a.m. until
actually
8 p.m. 8:30 p.m.
What is it? It's Panthers versus Giants.
Giants.
Maybe I won't watch that. Now that I think about it,
is it worth waking up that early?
There
could be some a lot of running.
Okay, that's true. I'm starting Daniel Jones in a fantasy league, so I might have to. But anyway,
I'm hoping that those 80 yards the Commanders QBs ran against them last week will hold up.
Yeah, hopefully
for this game.
But anyway, moving back to this game for the Packers, though, Packers lose 24-14. Injury update from the game. Colby Wooden was forced to go to the locker room at one point during the game with a shoulder injury. We don't have any other updates on that yet. And Jordan Love, he's gutting it out right now. The groin is not right, and I think he definitely, hopefully, will look maybe a little bit better off a bye week. We'll see. But he was limping around at the end of the first half. He looked actually, oddly enough, more mobile in the second half. And
better in the second half.
I had my binoculars on, and my friends were like, "Where's the Toradol shot? Did they? What did they hit him with in the locker room at halftime?"
It was like, my knee.
Yeah, they might have given him a shot at halftime because he was actually running around in the second half, and I was like, this is not the same guy who was
end of the first
half.
After that long throw down to Reed. I was like, oh, he's really limping now. They might take him out for the second half.
Yeah. But so hopefully he can heal up over the bye, and
we just need a reporter to go up there and ask him. So what was your injury there during the game?
My hip, my groin,
my groin.
But yeah, so. That's it. Packers lose 24-14. Dad, let's start off with our gut check. How do you feel about this game? Just emotionally, viscerally.
My main reaction when the game was over was just disappointment. I thought there were just so many missed opportunities by shooting themselves in the foot. They just made too many mistakes in a game where they were actually able to make some things happen. They just too many errors, and so ultimately it was. I felt like the game should have been better than it was because they could perform, but then, got behind the 8 ball too many times.
Exactly. Yeah, my gut check was very similar, but I think actually I was a little bit more positive. Obviously, this game sucked in a lot of different ways, but I feel better about where the ceiling of this team is in terms of if they could just stop beating themselves over and over and over again, they could be like quite a good team and really compete. But the problem is they do keep making mistakes over and over and over again. But yeah, so my takeaway was like, oh wow, like you could see where like how good this team could be. But right now you see the things that are holding them back from being the team that they want to be, and that there's a lot to still clean up before they can even get close to being that team. Because right now, they're just very mistake prone, in critical situations, not executing. And it's obviously frustrating and disappointing in a big divisional game that you need to win. But yeah, those are my big takeaways. Were just that, you can see how good the team could be, but you also could see like they just have so much to clean up. And I think that is a good, the bye week's coming at a good time because they got a lot to focus on here. And we'll be talking about that during that bye week podcast. We won't focus on it too much now. But yeah, that's my gut check. Is it's disappointing, but I think there is some optimism there where it's like, oh, like if they just didn't drop the ball, like they're right there, they score with them. If they just didn't have this penalty, oh, they score and they're like right there. And then, but right, you saw the difference between a team that's like really on their P's and Q's with the Lions and a team that is still making young mistakes with the Packers. But yeah, so that's my gut check. And like you mentioned, Dad, yeah, well, like I was saying, the bye week's coming at a good time.
Yeah, I really like this mid-season bye week. They got their a little bit banged up, so that'll help as well.
Exactly, yeah. And so let's start talking about the game, though, Dad. Game breakdown, the biggest moment of the game, which was, I think we all knew it when it happened, the pick six near the end of the first half, which moved the Lions' win probability from a 74.9% to an 89.8%. That's per ESPN win probability. With a change, that's a change of almost 15%, 14.9%. And yeah, that was probably the big turning point in the game was that pick six. You're down 10-3. It really should have been 10-6 because you missed a field goal. But then it's 17-3, and the next time your offense, really gets a chance to touch the field, I guess they get a little bit there at the end of the first half. But the next time you really have a drive, it's 24-3, and the game feels like it's over.
That was the thing, is because the Lions were getting the ball after half, and so the difference between giving up that pick six and getting a field goal at the end of half,
massive 10-point swing,
massive
10-point swing
in that game.
Yeah, and you end up losing by 10. So, but yeah, no, I mean, Love he knows he can't do that. I've been, I think, I've been less worried about the interceptions for Love, and I maintain that because his turnover-worthy play rate is actually middle of the pack, and I think we'll get some variance regressing back to that. But plays like that can't happen because you are just giving them 7 points, and when you're playing good teams, you cannot just be giving them 7 points.
Yep.
And so you just can't. You need to be willing to let the play die. And I think that's part of him not letting plays die and being aggressive is part of what makes him a good quarterback, a really good quarterback. But I think that, he needs to, the next step for him is being a little bit more discerning on when to be aggressive, knowing the play is like, oh, it's first down. I don't need to do this right now. We can just throw it at the running back's feet and take 2nd and 10,
It's like I say, learning when to burn it, just dirt it. It's like, okay, this play's already dead in the water.
Yeah. And I don't because I don't have as much problem with the, throws where it's like, oh, he's thrown into a really tight window and it's a bang, bang play and the defender makes a play on it and they get the pick. And because you need him to make those aggressive throws for him to be a really good quarterback. And the really good quarterbacks make those throws. The ones that are not as good are the ones where it's like, okay, you're under pressure and you're trying to get it away and you're just throwing it up. Like those are the ones that you need to cut out. And I have faith that he will because we saw last year that he did. But I think that's the big next step for him is being a little more discerning on when to take, when to just, like you mentioned, just call the play, take the small loss so you don't take a big loss. Like just take a small loss on a play. It's okay. But yeah, so that was the turning point in the game. Dad, let's start off with the offense, though, since we're already talking about Love a little bit. And we'll talk about the offense, then the defense, then the special teams. There were some positives. There were some negatives from this game. But, Dad, what is the coaching staff saying about this game? What's LaFleur saying? What are the players saying? What are the team's takeaways on the offensive side of the football from this one?
Yeah, so LaFleur had a few comments about the offense in the postgame presser. Said, when we were driving or getting into scoring position, it seemed like we had false starts, we had snaps, the ball was on the ground, just way too many mistakes. You cannot do that against a good football team because they're going to make you pay. And then he also said, we don't convert in the red area. That's been a problem, obviously. 1 of 4 is not good enough. We've got to take a hard look at that over the course of the next week.
Yep.
And then when he was asked about this, I think it was Rob Domofsky. It was a little hard. I can't always identify the voice asking the questions. That LaFleur said, yes, we were under center to help Love.
And that is one thing that I thought was encouraging because you remember against the Jaguars, when he first tweaked that groin, they did not go under center at all after that. They were only in shotgun for the rest of the game as long as he was in. And so the fact that he was able to go under center in this game, I think was at least a, bit of a bright spot for his, injury progressing to maybe getting a little bit healthier. Because I was worried they'd come into this game and it's like, okay, he can't move at all and he can only do shotgun. And so that cuts the playbook damn near in half. But at least he was able to go under center in this one. But Dad, let's start with some positives.
Yeah, and when he was in shotgun, they had some snapping problems.
Oh yeah, we'll talk all about it, Dad. Let's talk about the offense though. Let's start with some positives on this one. I'll start. I thought the run game was really good. The Packers ran the ball really well in this one. Josh Jacobs had a really good day, and all the running backs really did. When you look at the Lions' run defense coming into this game, they were a really strong unit. You look at either EPA per play or success rate. They were 8th lowest EPA per carry coming into the game and the 11th lowest success rate allowed coming into the game per RBSDM. So they were a really strong run defense coming into this game. And the Packers had .091 EPA per carry, which would be the equivalent of the best in the league. So if you looked at season long and they did that for a whole season, that would be even better than the Lions on the season. And they also had the equivalent of the 7th best success rate on the season. So the Packers ran the ball really well. And some people might say, how much of that was, in the second half when the Lions were more playing the pass and they were kind of giving up the run just because, time and score and situation. Even if you look at just the first half, the Packers had a rushing success rate of 54%, which would be best in the league by a mile. They had 7.2 yards per carry from their running backs. And you have this here. Josh Jacobs led all running backs in rushing yards over expectation and rushing yards over expectation per attempt in this one. He looked really good in this game. He looked really, really good in this game.
Yeah, adding that little note was my attempt to try to steal your thunder.
Yes.
On your good thing.
But yeah, he looked good in this game, huh?
He did. He was he looked a little sore some of the time, but he kept going back out there and grinding.
Yeah, and popping explosive runs and also getting more than was blocked for him. I thought the run blocking was fine in this one, but getting more than was blocked for him.
Some of the numbers on the run blocking were actually the numbers on some of the run blocking were actually good.
Well, go ahead. That was one of your positives, because the last thing I was just going to say is they could use Jacobs even more, and I'd like to see him used more in the passing game specifically. But like you were mentioning, the run blocking was pretty good in this one too.
Yeah, by NFL Pro, they were 6th in the league in yards before contact per rush at 2.97. This was the most yardage before contact on the season for Green Bay for a game. On the year, they are 11th in the league with an average of 1.52 yards before contact per attempt. So this was, almost twice as much, as many yards before contact on average. And this average would be better than the league leader, which is Baltimore at 2.84 for the season leader. And by PFF, this was their best run blocking grade on the season. The offensive line was also good in pass blocking by some metrics. Per NFL Pro, they gave up the 3rd longest time to pressure on the week at 3.45 seconds. And their season average is 2.81, so significantly better than their season average. This is the slowest time to pressure, or most seconds per until pressure they've given up all year. And is better than the season league leader of San Francisco at 2.99, significantly better than their average. They gave up no sacks and the 4th lowest QB pressure percentage on the week at 25.6%, which is their lowest pressure percentage given up on the season. And you had a little note here.
I will say, yeah. So
you wanted to retort.
Yeah, on the whole, the pass blocking was good. Like when you look at those numbers, time to throw, time to pressure, pressure rate are all very important numbers when you're assessing unit-wide pass blocking in terms of how the whole offensive line is doing. I will say, though, they really specifically struggle with Aleem McNeil. He had 7 pressures in this game as an interior defensive lineman. That's a ton. And it didn't matter if he was specifically really abusing Sean Ryan and Jordan Morgan, specifically Sean Ryan. There are multiple plays on key 3rd downs where Ryan just barely gets a hand on him. So I will say, on the whole, those numbers look really good, but I thought specifically the Aleem McNeil matchup, he won that more times than the Packers did, and that was a problem for Green Bay in the passing game at times.
I think one of the reasons why that was a problem is because of, Love's limited mobility.
I wonder
with his,
also
groin injury.
But I would say yes, but the fact that he had such a low pressure to sack rate, like a 0% pressure to sack rate, shows that I don't think it's all mobility. I mean, when you're getting beat up the middle routinely, I would actually wonder how much of it was not having Myers and not having Josh Myers as someone to, help out a little bit on some of those double teams. And because, Elton at center was not bad from a blocking perspective, but I think if you have Elton at left guard, the center is more able to help the right guard. So, because if you have Elton at left guard, you can leave him one-on-one more than you're leaving Morgan at left guard. And if you're leaving Elton one-on-one as your left guard, the center can help the right guard with Aleem McNeil more. But because you have Elton at center and he's having to help left and right, you are giving Aleem McNeil, I think, more one-on-one opportunities there. I wonder if you just have to double him more the next time they play. That's just something I'm kind of keeping an eye on. But yeah, so The pass
And
blocking was
another thing
good on the unit, but for them, like they just struggled with their best player.
Yeah. So the one thing I just thought of as you were talking about this is maybe Meyer's responsibility in like calling out the blocking scheme and pressures where people are coming from. Maybe identifying what's happening up front. I don't know. That's just wild speculation.
Yeah,
That
I mean,
they
missed Myers. They missed his snapping, for sure. And I think they missed, he's had a pretty good year so far, I will say. And I think, if they wanted to bring him back, I wouldn't hate it. Any other positives, though, on the offensive side of the ball, or should we talk about some of the negatives?
I mean, just in comparison to Detroit, they had, more total yardage, more yards per play, more yards per pass, and more yards per rush than Detroit. 5th on the week in total yards and 2nd in yards per play on the week in the league.
Yeah. But the thing was, they just didn't capitalize when they really needed
convert.
to. They couldn't convert. And that brings us to some of the negatives. And I think the biggest negative in this game, we already talked about shooting themselves in the foot. Mistakes. Green Bay just made too many mistakes. They had 5 penalties on offense, with 4 of them being pre-snap penalties. I don't know how you get 4 false starts at home. That's alarming. That's not good at all. And it's not just one person. Like, it was Tom had one, Josh Jacobs had one, and I think, I can't remember the other 2 that had. It was not just one person. It was a bunch of different people jumping early, not knowing the snap count, et cetera, et cetera. So that was one thing. The penalties really killed them. And then 5 different drops. I would actually argue 6 if you include the one where Watson just mistracked the deep ball and jumped at the wrong time. I'll give him some accident forgiveness because the storm was crazy and the wind probably whipped that ball around a little bit. But so 5 different drops, 3 botched snaps from Elton Jenkins where he's just firing them at Jordan Love's feet, and one series where it was 2nd and 10, botched snap. They somehow get the ball back and get it back to 3rd and 10, and then immediately another botched snap. It's like, okay, back-to-back botched snaps to kill a drive in the red zone. Cool. I think that one was in the red zone. And then, it would be one thing if this was a one-game thing, but this is a 9-week theme. Green Bay is the 9th most penalized team in the league in terms of penalties per game, with a large chunk of those being, pre-snap penalties, which is, those are easily controllable. That's the thing. These are not penalties where it's like, oh man, the guy got around me and I had to hold on to him. Like, you really got to tip your hat to that guy, making a good play. You just don't know the snap count. Or you're getting unnecessary roughnesses after the play. Like, over the course of the game, they had 11 different penalties. 2 of them I'm not really counting because one was an intentional delay of game that they took just to, they were trying to get the other guys to jump off sides. And then the other was, an out-of-bounds kickoff on the onside kick, which I think is just the cost of doing business on an onside kick. But the 9 other penalties, 6 of them were pre or post-snap. So it's like, okay, those are just mistakes. There is nothing that the other person is doing to throw you off your game. You can't even say, oh, the other guy made a play there. You just don't know the snap count. You just can't stay focused, can't just not put your fingers in another guy's face mask. Like, these are correctable things. And I would say, like, oh, it's just, bad storm, bad weather, et cetera, et cetera. It's a 9-week sample now. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that they need to clean up over the bye week, whether it's, simpling, making some of the calls a little more simpler, simplifying the offense maybe a little bit, whether it's, paring down the roles for some of the players who are making a lot of these mistakes. Like, on those, the drops were almost exclusively on 3rd down. 4 of the drops were on 3rd downs. Like, that is brutal.
Conversions or touchdowns.
Exactly. And, I'll just go to the next thing because it kind of leads into that. Sorry, Dad, I'm just going to talk for a little bit here. Well, actually, sorry, do you have any thoughts on the mistakes or what are your thoughts?
Well, I would say, in terms of the penalties, there's some penalties where you should take the penalty. You got beat and your quarterback's about to get his head taken off. You just grab the guy and pull him down. Or as a defensive back, the guy's running by, he's got a clean touchdown. It's like, nope, rather give up the DPI and then let him get into the end zone.
Exactly. But these are just a false start. They can't just go in early.
Just not being, paying attention. Some of it they're kind of trying to cheat on the snap a little bit, trying to time it a little bit too precisely. You just got to be focused,
locked in,
pay attention.
It's at home. You don't have there's no road crowd noise. Like,
no, it's not the road crowd noise. I think they're just trying to get a little.
But then there are ones where it's just like, oh, you just like the receiver. We had false starts from receivers in this one. We had a false start from a running back in this one. Like, those are not trying to beat the snap count. Like, 4 of those false snaps, 2 of them were skill position players. That's just not knowing the snap count. That's just not knowing the play. And that can't happen. But yeah, so I really thought Green Bay, I wish there was a way. I didn't go through this, but expected points lost to just stupid mistakes. I'm pretty sure Green Bay, this has to be a record.
That seems like it's going to be a lot.
Because not only did they make a ton of mistakes, they were all in crucial situations. Like, you look at it, oh, it's 3rd and 3 on the first drive. Oh, Sean Ryan false start. It's 3rd and 8. Oh, you didn't get it. You have another 3rd down. You hit Wicks right in the chest, and it goes through his hands, and then you punt. You go 3 and out. You have another one where Wicks in the end zone, and it hits him in both hands, and he drops it. You lose a touchdown there. You have another 3rd down where Kraft has a drop. You have another 3rd down where Dobbs has a drop. You're just not moving. You're not converting drives because you're making these mistakes, you have 2 botched snaps when you're moving in their end of the field, and it's just like so many crucial stuff. And that's why, well, I'll go to my next negative. But Dad, what did you have as your negative?
Yeah, so the first thing I have is about the red zone offense, which even LaFleur acknowledged in the postgame, or the next day presser, I forget which one that was. Technically 1 for 5 in the red zone, though one of them was as time expired, so you can say that.
Yeah, I'm not counting that one.
Hard to knock him for that one.
They never took a snap in the red zone there. I'm not even counting that. But 1 of 4.
They didn't get a snap. But out of the 4, they only got 14 points out of those 4 trips.
Yeah, they went.
So that kind of hurts.
They went field goal.
Out of 4 times in the red zone, you only get 14 points.
Yeah, field goal, turnover on downs, touchdown. Like
touchdown with a 2-point conversion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you just can't. And that's the other thing. What are your thoughts on the first one, 4th and 5, not going for it on 4th down?
I think he should have gone for it. I think he needed to go for it.
Well, what about the counter argument that it's a really stormy day and it's probably going to be low scoring?
You know that the Lions are going to be aggressive and going for touchdowns and everything. You expect that they're going to score, and you're going to have to win a scoring battle.
Yeah, that's fair. That was just something I was thinking about after the game. Because at the time I was like, okay, very stormy day. You're probably not expecting a lot of points. You take the points you can get. But yeah, the storm did not affect the Lions. We'll say that.
No, it didn't seem to at all.
That's the other thing is like the drops. Like people be like, oh, like it was crazy rainy. It's like, yeah, it was crazy rainy for the other team. They didn't drop the ball. But yeah, so it's not great. And that's what I was going to mention too, is that the situational offense, you mentioned the red zone, 4 trips to the red zone, 2 field goals and a failed 4th down. And you only get the touchdown like on the last drive when it's really pretty much over. But besides the red zone, the 3rd downs were terrible too. Overall, they were 3 of 12 on 3rd down. They started 1 of 9. And you had drops by, the drops were by Brooks, Kraft, and then 2 by Wicks. So 4 drops on 3rd down, a false start to move them back, and a botched snap. Like, so 6 of those 3rd downs, 6 of those 9 that they, had and got 1 of were completely waylaid by mistakes. Whether it's a penalty or a bad snap or a drop. So just situational offense, just not doing that. And, this is something you put in here. It looks like about, percentage of passes dropped. Not exactly, a good one. One that I saw was that the Packers have 20 drops on the season and the Lions have 1. For a comparison there.
So that would was like, it was a little thing I had for a bad thing that I just lost track of where it was in the outline and put it into your section. That's why it's not marked with bold. with the note just for me.
What is
it? Was just supposed to be my section.
Go ahead. What was the stat though? I'll lob it up for you.
Okay. Well, he just had the highest percentage of passes dropped in the whole league on the week per PFF, and for the season, he has the 7th highest drop percentage in the league.
Yeah.
And so.
And he said after the game for the Wicks one in the end zone specifically, he was like, I put that behind him. He's like, I need to do a better job of putting it on him. But he also said, he's like, I know, I believe that Wicks can make that catch. I know he believes he can make that catch. Like, we just gotta. He's like, I got to put it better on him. We just got to execute, et cetera, et cetera. But the other ones, like the Chris Brooks drop, really killed me. It's like, let's just have our best players on the field. I understand that Chris Brooks is a good pass protector. He's played pretty well so far for Green Bay as like a secondary running back. But let's just have our best players on the most important downs. Like let's just have Josh Jacobs out there for critical 3rd downs. And I understand that Brooks is good at those things, and he's the reason he's in there on 3rd downs is because that's what he's best at. Because you wouldn't have him in there on 1st and 2nd down because his best trait is his pass protection, and he's actually a better pass protector than Josh Jacobs. But let's just have our best players on the field on 3rd downs. Like, I think that's just
the high leverage plays when we're looking we're in the sort of scoring zone of the field.
Exactly. But yeah, so those are the negatives. Any other negatives on the offensive side of the ball you want to touch on, Dad?
I still have some more.
Cool. Hit it.
Love's completion percentage over expected was 20th in the league on the week. And if you want to blame the conditions,
I'm blaming the drops is what I'm blaming. If you add those 6 drops, it's fine.
And that Goff was first in the week.
But I will also add, you add those drops. Yes, and if you give him 6 more completions, like the completion percentage is fine. And also, Jared Goff had an intended air yards on his passes of 3.8, which was the 3rd lowest on the week, and Love was at 10 yards per attempt, which was 4th highest. Which does make me wonder, though, why did the game plan not change at all with
that?
The weather?
Right. So my rebuttal to your retort is that this might not be a Love issue, but a LaFleur issue, where they're
why are we still
going
trying
downfield in a storm?
But the counter argument to that counter argument is, hey, if the guys catch the passes, like the game plan looks fine though. Like the game plan looks fine if guys just catch. But at the same time, you are inviting the variance of drops in a stormy weather game by just not altering your game plan at all. And it was clear that the Lions came into the game with a game plan that was catered to, hey, we're going to just check it down short and get some run after the catch. We're going to run the ball hard. And that's just how we're going to beat them. And it's going to work in these conditions. And Green Bay, it seems, we're just going to play our game. And, I think you can argue either way as to which is better, but the results showed that the Lions' approach was better in this one.
Yeah, there was also a comment during the game, I think, from one of the announcers about how the Lions had specifically practiced for like rain conditions.
The Packers practiced in the rain all week outside.
Did LaFleur say that was gimmicky? Was that the quote they had from him?
But the Packers practiced outdoors all week in the rain in these exact conditions. So that doesn't really do anything for me.
I need to think about what their gloves are wearing, or I don't know what the problem is. And so, but a couple more things. Love also threw into the 3rd tightest windows on average in the week. So not getting much separation, where at least who's throwing through.
Yeah.
And despite some overall positive run offense numbers, they were still stuffed on the 7th highest rate of the week per NFL Pro.
Oh, that 4th and 1 really hurt. They just got no push at all on that play at all. That was just like bad blocking there. But yeah, anything else on the negative side of the offense though, Dad? Or do you want to go to things that made us think?
I could go to things that make us think.
Okay, what made you think in this one? What are some things where you're like, what's going on
after
here?
the game, I'm thinking like, is it time for Green Bay to shorten up their wide receiver rotation and
concentrate
targets?
Exact same thing written down.
Concentrate targets on the players who are being the most productive.
So I have that exact same thing written down. When you look at this game, it's just that the target distributions to me don't make a whole lot of sense. So you look at this, and overall on the day for the Packers pass catchers, the leading target getter was Christian Watson with 7, and then Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft each had 6. Dobbs had 5. Chris Brooks had 4. Jacobs with 3. Melton with 2. Wilson with 1. And I'm looking at this, and I don't think there's a scenario where Watson should be leading you in targets. I don't think that should ever happen. I think you need to funnel the game between, I think by far, Reed should have the most targets. He should be getting like 10 a game. And then Kraft should be getting like 6. You need to be getting, I think, Jacobs the ball more in passing situations and calling more screens for him. And then Dobbs can also be getting like 6 to 7. And then Watson, Melton, and Wicks should be combining for like 7 or 8. I don't think Watson should be your leading target getter on a day. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, the other thing that we think about this, so Watson led the team in targets with 7. He also led the league in air yards per target this week with 20.
Yeah.
Is this the right strategy in the rain with a QB with a leg injury? So you have long developing plays downfield in a rainstorm? Is that where you want to have most of your targets going? And I understand that Watson seems to be the best for like your big play guy. But is that the best strategy in these conditions?
Is he? Because he's not tracking the ball well right now, and he's not the best. I would say Jaden Reed is your best downfield receiver. Like, I feel like those hit way more often than the ones to Watson. And so it's like
he has had a lot of big plays this year.
I think they need to feature Reed even more than they are. Like 6
Absolutely.
targets.
That's the main thing is they should be going for 10 targets to Reed.
And they need to give him the ball.
They should be just spamming him the ball like they would to any number 1 receiver.
And spamming him underneath, because when you look at those 6 targets, one was the big chuck it play at the end of the first half, which barely even counts. And then the other one was, back shoulder, the one that he made a spectacular catch out of the slot. But where are the shallow crossers? Where are, the deeper crossers? Like, I think they just need to send him on a few more crossing routes and just pepper him some targets like in the short and intermediate area and get him some runways to run after the catch there. Because also, teams know you are throwing that screen to him. They have a beat on that, and they've had a beat on that for like 7 or 8 weeks. The one that they almost picked off. That one with the group,
the little stack of receivers over on the right side.
Exactly.
Yeah, they almost pushed through to get that. They knew exactly what was coming.
Exactly. And so that's something that's, they just need to get him the ball more, and I think just more less screens, more shallow crossers. But anyway, I think that does it for the offensive side of the football, right, Dad? Anything else you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I would just say they should kind of treat Reed sort of like the Lions treat Amon-Ra St. Brown. They just feed him a bunch of targets.
Yeah, but we got a whole nother side of the football to talk about, and we got a lot of time already. We've
used a lot of time already.
So let's move over to the defensive side of the football, Dad. And what are the Packers coaching staff saying about that side of the ball?
So one of the quotes from LaFleur was on Monday, "They got us yesterday in a critical situation where I don't think they were going to run a play, and we jumped offsides. It allowed them to go for it, and they made a play on fourth down. It was a critical play in the game."
Yep, and he's talking about the TJ Slayton, neutral zone infraction, encroachment, et cetera, et cetera. Another pre-snap penalty, one of their 6 on the day. And yeah, it's 4th and goal at the 5. What is an extra jump from your nose tackle going to accomplish on that play? That's my question, is even if you got a perfectly timed jump on the snap, he snaps the ball and you're immediately there, what is the gain?
Yeah.
What are you getting out of that?
Plus Goff is in shotgun.
Exactly.
So it's not like he's right behind the center where if you split that gap fast, you can grab him.
Yeah.
He's still another 4 yards, away.
Yeah. It's not a 4th and inches run play. They're not running a sneak. They're not running a tush push. What does an extra jump from your nose tackle even accomplish? Even if he does it perfectly? It's like, yeah. And, you could argue it's like, hey, they ran a fade and they got it anyways. So would it have really mattered? Which is a fair argument. But
it just opens up the whole playbook when you're down at 4th and 1 instead of 4th and 6.
Well, yeah, 4th and 3.
4th and 5, whatever it was.
Well, they went down to 4th and 3 because it was a half the distance penalty. But still, it's another mistake that they just can't have. And, they just, there are a lot of, there's some good, from the defense in this one. When you look at it, on the whole, it's like you gave up 17 points to a team that had been averaging close to 40 over the last month. So there is that. But at the same time, there are a lot of negatives as well. And I think, like you mentioned on that 4th down, none worse than just high leverage downs. And we talked about it coming into this game, that this game might just end up being decided on who wins a few coin flip downs on 4th down. And the Lions did. You look at that 4th down, that 4th and goal at the 5, the encroachment moves it to the 3. And they get a touchdown on the fade to Amon-Ra St. Brown that makes it 7-3. And then later on, 4th and 1 at the Green Bay 15, they run it. They get a 15-yard touchdown run to Gibbs, and it's 24-3. So, and that pretty much put the game away there with them getting the touchdown. And so 2 massive high leverage downs that you could get them off the field on 4th down. Instead, both go for touchdowns. And that was the game right there. And so I think that was my biggest negative, is just not, buckling down and those, big plays when you really had to have them.
Right. I got to remember we're making the sandwich, so got to do the bad things first.
Got to do the bad things first and end with the good. Yeah.
So for me, Green Bay had the slowest pass rush get off, so that's like, I think it's seconds to cross the line of scrimmage on the week, and the 7th longest time to pressure on the week on defense. The efficiency of passing they gave up was kind of ridiculous. Detroit had the 7th best EPA per pass in the week against Green Bay, according to PFF.
Mm-hmm. And they still, I think, over the last 5 games, have more touchdowns on offense than incompletions, which is just an absolutely just nutty stat.
Yeah. Their slot coverage wasn't great for the week. Nixon gave up the 5th highest passer rating against his coverage in the slot at 118.8. And Eric Wilson also gave up a passer rating of 118.8 in slot coverage. Only 2 players on the team had 2 pressures, and 4 had 1, and then the rest with none. So they were not getting pressures either.
Okay, I actually am just seeing a bit of breaking news, not actually breaking news for the Packers, but it does relate to their defense. Apparently, Preston Smith requested a trade a couple of weeks ago. So that is some calculus into, that trade going down. So that's just a little bit of an extra little piece of news there.
And maybe that's why that rumor was out there that he was,
available,
going to get traded, or the Packers are shopping around because he requested it.
Yeah, he said he's, just didn't feel as comfortable in the 4-3 and is excited to get back to a 3-4, which, fair enough. No ill will towards Preston. Totally understand it. He had been losing some snap counts.
He's been a pro, as I say. He does his job.
He requested a trade, but didn't make a major drama about it. Just
he
still
did
went
pull
out
us
and
on
played.
Reddick.
Yeah, still went to practice. Et cetera, et cetera. No ill will towards Preston for requesting a trade. Totally understand it. And he was losing some snaps to some younger guys, so I get it. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, like you mentioned, Dad, the pass rush was not good in this one, huh? I mean, when you look at it, it's like a 34.8% pressure rate isn't terrible. It would actually be 10th on the year if you looked at season long totals, but 3.047 seconds to pressure. These numbers are per NFL Pro. Would be the slowest in the league on the season. Over 3 seconds is really bad. And then 2.86 seconds to throw. Time to throw would be 10th slowest. They're just not getting there fast enough. They're just not getting there fast enough to the passer.
Right. So it seems like some of their pressure rate numbers, pressure percentage numbers, are like bolstered by coverage. Coverage pressures.
The coverage is good right now, and that's why the pressure numbers look better than they actually are. But when you peek under the hood, they're not getting any kind of fast pressure at all. They're not getting into the backfield at all, and it's like, I don't know. There's no fix really right now that I can see.
The only fix I can see is schematic, where they're
Yeah, one of my favorite
blitzing.
NBA podcasts, the Dunker Spot, will say sometimes you just got to hit the play better button, and I think that is part of what the Packers need to do. They just need to play better.
Sometimes that button's been removed from your control board.
The button is stuck right now. It is not working. But yeah, no. Sorry, go ahead though. I just thought that was I think the edge rushers and Brian Gutekunst said this. Sorry, one more thing. Brian Gutekunst said that they expect more out of these edge rushers. They asked him about it, and he's like, "We expect more out of them." And his presser after the trade deadline. So even he thinks
ought to
like
after
they just
drafted him so high.
I know. Even he thinks like, "Hey, they just need to play better." Like there's not too much else there.
Yeah, either they play better or you have to do something to get pressure if you can't get home with 4.
Yeah, now their blitz rate's not very high.
No, it was higher this week than I expected. But it is like those work. I think you just got to be a madman.
And I think I did see on another podcast, and I apologize which one it was, but coming into this week, so it's not including the stats against the Lions, the Packers have actually a pretty good pressure rate when sending 5. Their pressure rate sending 5 is pretty good, but they have the second largest gap between the pressure rate with 5 and pressure rate with 4 of any team in the league. There's only one other team that has like a similar
bigger delta,
a bigger gap, and it's pretty close between them and the top team. But yeah, the gap between pressure rate sending 4 and pressure rate sending 5 for Green Bay is massive, and that tells you all about the front four and how they're playing against the pass right now.
Yeah, so really feeling the difference of switching from rushing 5 in base to rushing 4 in base.
Yeah, and I think also just feeling I think the Packers have good blitzers. Like, Edgerrin Cooper is a good blitzer. Keyshawn Nixon is a pretty good blitzer. Xavier McKinney, when they want to use him that way, has done pretty well blitzing.
Evan Williams is a good blitzer.
Evan Williams is a pretty good blitzer. I don't think they've used him that much there, but he was good coming out of college at it.
But I think he's got some skill at it.
He's got the skill at it, yeah. But they have players who are good blitzers. It's just like they can't do anything else when they're not sending them. So that's a little bit frustrating. But yeah. The pass rush is not good enough, and I think that's one of the two things that are the biggest concern right now for the Packers are the mistakes they're making on offense and the lack of pass rush on defense. And I think one of those is fixable, and the other one, I'm not sure how they're gonna do that.
Yeah, maybe we'll see with because personnel's changing.
Yeah,
but
ultimately, Dad, you look at the defense. It's like, okay, they gave up 17 points to the Lions. Like, that's not that bad.
No, we've had a lot of games where it's like seems like, but we're actually at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's not bad. And
in summary, they've done pretty well.
And even with no pass rush, this is the weird stat to me. Even with like pretty much no pass rush, they're one of the better third down defenses in the league. Like they're actually pretty good on third down, even though they can't rush the passer at all. I don't really know what to make of that. But yeah, any other negatives on the defensive side of the football?
No, I think I got all of mine in there already. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on to positives for the defensive side of the ball. Dad, what did we do well on defense in this one?
So for me, they gave up the 10th lowest yards per play on the week at 4.7 and the 6th fewest total yards on defense. McDuffie actually had a pretty good game. He had the 4th best defensive grade from PFF among all linebackers on the week at 89.5, and the 7th best run grade on defense. We had 4 tackles and 1 stop on the week, and only 18 snaps, 18 in the box and 1 on the D line. So 19 snaps total. They had their lowest missed tackle rate of the season at 7.1%.
It really didn't feel like it though. I looked at
went
that too. I was
numbers.
like, they only missed this many
So
tackles.
this is basically, use like how they calculated it on PFF, where you use like everybody's tackle. So that includes the assisted tackles. So boost that up a little bit, and the missed tackles out of all the sort of tackle attempts. Yeah. So their next best was over 11. So 4 percentage points better than their second best on the year.
Yeah. That's
so
weird.
That surprised me when I went through the numbers. Like, oh, they even in the wet conditions, they did a pretty good. They did a good job. Their best job of the year tackling.
And anecdotally, I came into doing the research and looking at the stats for this game, and I was like, oh, like I feel like their tackling was not good in this game. Let me go look at what their missed tackles were. And it's like, oh, they only missed like 7 tackles. Like that's not really that many. But yeah, for the positives for me, I thought they really actually did pretty well against the Lions' run game. Like really well, actually, against the Lions' run game. The Lions, we all know, came into this game with the league second best success rate at 46.3% and a league best EPA per carry at 0.071. So we all know they're an elite running team with that offensive line, that 2-headed monster in the backfield. And they held the Lions to a 33.3% success rate, which would be the equivalent of 31st on the year. Only the Raiders, like over the course of the year, have a worse success rate on the ground. So there's that. And then they held them to a negative 0.019 EPA per play, which would be EPA per carry rather, which would be 10th best on the league. And so they held them down pretty well there. And even if you want to say like, oh, hey, how much of that was just, Lions getting, letting their foot off the gas in the second half of that game. Even if you just look at the first half of the game, they held them to a success rate of 38.5%, which would be 20th best on the season, and an EPA per carry of negative 0.058, which would be 16th. So they held what was the best running game in the league, bar none, to a below average, run offense. They essentially made them look like a below average run offense on the day. And so I will say, that is at least some, shining light. Is like, hey, they saw what the Lions' biggest strength was, which was running the ball. And for the most part, defended the run pretty well. Now, I think anecdotally watching that game, it was like, dang, it does feel like when they really need a run, like when they really need a yard, they're able to get it still. But down to down, they actually, defended the Lions' run game pretty well.
Yeah, it was, as we kind of talked about going into the game, it's this high leverage plays. Can we win enough of those, high leverage situations or big plays? And that's really where we came up short. Otherwise, like down to down and the game as a whole, if you look at the yards per play and the success rate and the points given up, they generally did a good job. Yeah,
and it's like they generally did a good job. The counter argument to that is like, hey, in the gotta have it downs, like those fourth downs, they weren't able to get those, and the gotta have it drives, where it's like, okay, coming out of the half, you knew you could not let them score a touchdown, but they marched it down the field and did anyway. Like that was one where it's like it's 17-3. If you can just get a stop and a score, it's a 1-score game. But then it's 24-3, and it feels like the game is over. But that was my main positive on the defenses. Statistically they did pretty well against the run. But Dad, what were some things that made you think in this one?
Yeah, so for the defense, they still had the 6th highest blitz percentage on the week, even though I came away from the game feeling like they needed to blitz more. I was surprised when I looked at it to see that they had blitzed at that high of a rate compared to the rest of the league. And then the other thing that was kind of odd to me is that Eric Wilson had the most slot coverage snaps among the linebackers with 12. Only 5 for Cooper and none for Walker or McDuffie. That seemed a little bit odd because Cooper seems like their best coverage linebacker.
I don't think that has anything to do with the Packers. I think that is entirely the Lions manipulating the Packers defense into getting him into the slot. I think that is all about, how do we get Wilson matched up in the slot on a receiver? How do we move him to a place that he has to cover more space? I don't think that's the Packers being like, okay, let's have Wilson be in the slot. I think that's the Lions being like, how do we get Wilson? You just think
the Packers are not moving with their coverage with the.
Well, I think that's what all the best. This is what all the best offenses do. They find the mismatch on the field and they try and attack it as much as possible. I don't think Green Bay came into this game being like, yeah, we definitely want Wilson to be, taking a lot of snaps in the slot in this one. I don't think that's at all what Green Bay wants to happen. But when you're playing against a really elite offense, they're able to attack those mismatches. And I think that number just shows that was the mismatch that they identified was, hey, if Wilson has to cover guys in the slot, it's not going to go well for them.
Yeah, I think some of it might be whether you're willing to follow a receiver or where you're lining guys up as well.
I think that's entirely the Lions' offense stat.
You think it's
I think it's entirely a Lions offense stat.
Okay.
Because it's the same thing the Vikings did, where they got Wilson isolated on receivers in the slot and ran a ton of quick outs, and they just smoked.
Well, that's not just about like how many targets he had on him. That's how many snaps he had in the slot.
I know, but I think he's getting essentially motion. Like they're starting in probably a condensed formation. He's got like the guy who's pinched in tight, and the Packers are matching. They're probably matching with base because they're so worried about stopping the run, and then that they have to have a linebacker on a receiver at that point if they have like a condensed formation. They spread it back out, and then Wilson has to travel with the guy that he has because they're in man, and the guy he has is a slot receiver, and so he's stuck in the slot, and he's not going to do well there. I think that's a Lions stat for me.
You don't think it's because they have him out there and McDuffie in the box?
No,
so
I don't
that's
think.
What I think maybe the switch could be.
I don't think that's anything that the Packers want to have happen. I don't think they want Wilson in the slot because they see what happens when he's there. I think that's a Lions stat. The thing that made me think is Aaron Mosby. Is this anything? He had 3 snaps and a sack. We talked about it earlier. Gutekunst said in his presser he was excited to be getting him and Brenton Cox some more snaps with Preston getting traded. And they're just desperate for pass rush right now, so I'm just grasping at straws. Maybe Mosby can give them a little bit extra juice off the end. I don't know.
He has the highest pressure rate for any of their frontline players at
25%. That's true. If you just look at pass rush snaps, that's true. 33% on pass rush snaps. He's getting home. That's perfect. Great sack rate too. But yeah, so that'll probably do it for the defense. Anything else you wanted to throw in there? Should we move? Just wrap things up with special teams.
Let's. I think we move on to the special teams.
Yeah, I mean they missed a field goal. It was like a 48-yarder. It's the weather. It is what it is. Ideally, you make it, but I think there's some accident forgiveness there, but it does stink. And then the penalties, the unnecessary roughness on a massive kick return, like Keyshawn, please just don't do that. And then the holding on another return by Haddon, who had just been elevated from the practice squad. Obviously not ideal.
Yeah, and just with regard to those penalties, LaFleur had something to say about them in the press conference.
He was not happy.
Like, when you talk about the penalties at large, and then when you have the ones that are completely unacceptable, what I deem the selfish penalties, jawing, getting unsportsmanlike, those cannot happen. I take them very personally. That's on me because I put you in a position to get that. The next time that happens, you can take your helmet and come stand right next to me.
That's like the most like PO'd I think I've ever heard him. Like I think that's the most like upset about a penalty I think I've ever heard him. Like he actually sounded pretty mad. But yeah, anything else on the special teams that you wanted to touch on, Dad? I thought it was, the missed field goal really hurts, but
that empty trip where it really hurt their ability to stay in contact with the Lions.
Yeah.
The other thing I kind of just noticed looking at the drive statistics for the game, Green Bay actually is successful at pinning Detroit inside of their own 10 twice with punts, and once with a turnover on downs, which you can't say is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they did get pinned inside the 10 even one time themselves, like twice inside the 20 at the 17 and 18, so barely inside the 20.
Nice bounce back game from Whalen after a poor showing for Grim and
though he did get out punted on average, but part of that I think was because he had a punt to the 6 and a punt to the 9.
What did you think about the decision to punt from the plus territory? What are your thoughts on that?
Boo.
Probably should have just gone for it, huh? I know it was like what, 4th and 8 though? Like, but still, even if
4th and 8, is that what are they? That's like the 37, so it's going to be a 54-yard.
Like, they clearly
55-yard
kicking the field goal
try in the rain. It's like just go for it.
Yeah, just go for it. If you give it to him at the 37, whatever. Whatever.
Yeah, because if he doesn't manage to punt it short and goes in the end zone, like you barely any difference.
Yeah.
So just be aggressive.
Yeah,
this is a game you have to be aggressive, especially against a team that's going to be aggressive in return.
Yeah, they weren't aggressive enough in this game. They didn't really go for it. And it is what it is. But Dad, let's wrap things up here. Player of the game, who'd you have? I think there's only one real answer, right?
I think, I had Josh Jacobs. There's nobody else who really stood out on offense, and nobody who made big plays to stand out on defense, even though on aggregate they're good. Nobody was a standout.
Yeah, the only other one you could really say is maybe Jaden Reed is the only other one I would even hear, but I think it's pretty clearly Jacobs, and he was the only one who had, I would say, a very positive impact on the day, just of anyone.
Maybe Rasheed Walker. I think he had a decent day blocking.
It's not a very difficult matchup though. Like it's not like he's really playing against.
out. Yeah.
Which no, is good. He played a much cleaner game than he had too, so that's also good. He had been struggling with penalties, but anyway, Dad, that wraps things up. Packers lose 24-14, fall to 6-3, 6th in the NFC. Thank you again so much for listening. Check us out, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Please subscribe. Please leave a review. We would really appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker for updates on when new episodes come out. We'll be doing a special bye week episode after this week. No pregame this week because Packers are on bye, obviously. But we'll be doing a bye week midway through the season check-in. So please check that out next week. And Dad, until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.